let me just clue you in on this. The combined murder and suicide rate in the United States is lower than in Belgium, Switzerland, France, Bulgaria, Austria, Croatia, Denmark, Finland, Slovenia, Ukraine, Hungary, Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Russia. And in many of those cases, our rate is far, far smaller than the rate in European countries. For example, our suicide rate, it's 43% of Finland's, and our murder rate is 25% of Russia's. Other continents have even worse crime. The murder rate in the United States is lower than the murder rate in most of Southeast Asia, in the Caribbean, Africa, all but one South American nation, in all of Central America and Mexico. By the way, if you want to know where these statistics come from, they do come from our president's alma mater, the Harvard Journal of Law. In fact, I have it all cited. I have an entire chapter devoted to it. It's all cited. In fact, here, let me accurately quote it. This comes from Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy 30, number 2, 2006, pages 649 through 694. I also have statistics on data radio from the DOJ and CDC and others. Now, additionally, among the world's nations, there is zero. I spent over a year of my life researching this. There is zero correlation between fewer guns and less crime. In fact, to the contrary, amongst developed countries, the countries that have the fewest guns, like Turkey and Chile and Estonia, often have the most crime. On the other hand, Switzerland, which has more guns per capita than all other but 2 countries in the world, although I do disagree with how they do it. The state purchases the firearm and gives it to the household, which I think you should be able to purchase it yourself. It shouldn't be a state-mandated thing. You have to have it by law. But they have a far lower murder rate than countries that heavily restrict guns, like Canada and Great Britain and Australia. Even the Washington Post, you guys, this was back in 2012, in a rare moment of lucidity, they had to admit that, quote, countries with the most guns don't necessarily have the most gun-related homicides. Now, for a good example of this, Honduras. A very good example. The difference between gun control and crime control. The small Central American nation, they have a national registry of firearm ownership. They prohibit people from carrying a gun openly in public, and they put limits on the number of guns an individual can purchase. And yet Honduras has the most gun violence in the world, even though there are only 6.2 guns per 100 Hondurans, and that's compared to 88 guns per 100 Americans. There are over 68 gun murders per 100,000 Hondurans, compared to 3.2 gun murders per 100,000 Americans. So in other words, on a per capita basis, Honduras has 21 times more gun murders than America, even though it has 14 times fewer guns. Now, of course, there are individuals who just don't want you to believe that there is an unusually large amount of murders. And they want you to think that this is unique to America. They want you to dwell on tragic atrocities like what happened at Columbine and Newtown, and God help us, in Charleston. They are rare. These are rare, horrible and rare. But we hear it over and over again that this is a uniquely American problem, that this is a symptom of, quote, gun culture. I'm sorry, but that's wrong. Oh, there's a symptom, all right. It's evil. An average of 10 people die each year in the United States in shootings where at least 4 people are killed. I mean, look, we can all agree that anybody who dies from a gun crime, anybody who dies from a crime, that's one person too many, right? But here's the thing. Our crime rate, it happens to be less, that 10 that I was mentioning, it happens to be less than the 11 people who are killed in mass shootings in an average year in Western Europe. Even more revealing for the purposes of the gun rights debate is that time and time again, Europe's mass shootings, they happen in places where civilians are prohibited from carrying guns. I took a look at this in my book in chapter 9, And I discussed, for instance, how in Finland, the Firearms Act of 1998, it requires anybody who wants a gun to request a license from the government. You cannot just go and carry a loaded gun in Finland. But that didn't stop a murderer from a shooting rampage in November of 2007. An 18-year-old student walked into a school and murdered 8 people. The scene of that school was very familiar to anyone who ever watched coverage of Columbine or Newtown. Students and teachers, they were barricaded inside of classrooms. There are other examples as well. Those students were murdered in front of those teachers who had only minutes earlier they'd been teaching. The execution of people like the school nurse who dared to try to help innocent children, for instance. Then a year later, there was a murderer who walked into a Finnish college campus and murdered 10 people. These were gun-free zones. All the victims were unarmed. In France, the government has banned semi-automatic rifles and basic capacity magazines. The number of bullets you can purchase are also limited. None of that stopped another murder, another shooting rampage, March 2002. A murderer walked into a town council meeting and killed 8 town councilors in cold blood. Again, it was a gun-free zone. The victims were unarmed. In Germany, those who want to own a firearm, they're subjected to some of the toughest gun control laws in the world. And those who want a firearm merely for self-defense, they're not allowed to own a gun. And of the few who are allowed to own a gun, the vast majority of them, they're prohibited from carrying. But that didn't stop another murderer from another rampage in March 2009. A 17-year-old murdered 5 students in a high school classroom. Each was shot in the head. And then he went and murdered 4 students in another classroom. And then he killed a teacher in a chemistry lab. Students were jumping from windows. He was finally cornered near a Volkswagen showroom. He killed 2 more teachers, a gardener and a salesperson, and a customer at the showroom. 15 victims, 9 others innocent who were injured. He said he did it for fun. Yeah, another gun-free zone. The victims were also unarmed. In Britain, handguns are illegal. Everything else heavily regulated. Gun control laws are even stricter there than in Germany, but that didn't stop another shooting rampage in June 2010. A 52-year-old cab driver murdered 12 people in less than 4 hours, injured another 11, amongst them a woman walking home from a shopping trip. He went after a farmer in a field, a retiree on his bike. This murderer's attacks covered 5 different cities in the region of Cumbria, which is supposed to be a gun-free area. All the victims were unarmed, and in none of these tragedies did the killer use a semi-automatic rifle. That's a whole other thing, but that's something that everyone likes to always blame for crimes in the United States. And in none of these tragedies were the civilians legally permitted to carry guns. The victims were defenseless, as well as the 15 members of a local parliament killed on September 27, 2001 in Switzerland. The 4 people killed by a railway worker, October 29, 2001 in France. 18 people at a high school, 2002 in Germany. 3 people by a single person in February 2002 in Germany. 7 people killed on a hillside in October in 2002, Turin, Italy. The 2 people killed by a fired co-worker October 1st, 2006 in Madrid. 11 people killed by a former student in November 2006 in Germany. 7 people killed at a town meeting in September 2008 in Naples, Italy. 10 people killed at a college in September 2008 in Finland. The 10 people injured by gunfire at a nursery school in Lyon, France in 2009. 3 people killed at a vocational college, 2009, April, Athens, Greece. 3 people killed at a cafe in April 2009 in the Netherlands. 1 person killed, 16 injured at a Sikh temple, May 2009, Vienna, Austria. 4 people killed at a shopping mall, New Year's Eve 2009, Espoo, Finland. I can sit here and I can go on for hours more. How can you have people say with a straight face that in Europe and in Australia and all of these other advanced countries, they don't have this problem? They don't have murderous rampages. It is not an educated remark. And it is offensive to the victims of these evil mass murderers in other countries, because it means that somehow those victims are being forgotten. As if somehow what European lives don't mean as much as American lives. Mass killings in Europe became harder for people to ignore. Last one, July 2011. This was horrific and it makes me sick. I'm not even going to say his name. In Norway, you know this. It happened on live television. A political extremist killed 8 people with a car bomb. And then he opened fire on a summer camp for children. He killed 69 innocent people. You all remember that one, 2011. People were hiding in caves and begging for their lives, and local fishermen were pulling them out of the water. The executions, this lasted for an hour and a half, and oh, God help us, it happened on live television. And Norway, they're pretty strict on their gun laws. Those murders, that incident was deadlier than Columbine, Aurora, and Newtown combined. Every single innocent death is one death too many. These are atrocities. I can't even imagine the pain. Everyone who knew and loved these victims. It's incredible evil, whether it's isolated or one of dozens. And my point, you guys, in describing these horrors, it's not to minimize anything that has happened in this country, but my point is that mass killings, they are not a uniquely American problem. To the extent that there is a sickness in our society, it is a sickness in every society. And its cause is not the Second Amendment. It is a moral deficiency. Evil is as old as Cain, and to the extent it can be combated, the prescription must include something more profound than even the most well-meaning of legislation. We'll be back after this.